So Nigel Farage has built his political career on the claim that he stands apart from the corrupt, self-serving establishment of Brussels. Yet today, irony abounds. Today, the very heart of his domestic credibility is being tested not over policy, but over proximity, money and moral judgment. His partner, Lori Ferrari, once an aide in the European Parliament and later head of the Eurosceptic Institute for Direct Democracy in Europe, now finds herself entangled in a criminal investigation in Belgium, and the case, which has been quietly advancing through the courts, is due for judgment on November the 5th in Chamber 69 of the Tribunal de Première Instance in Brussels, a court that deals specifically with financial crime. The allegation is not a minor bureaucratic oversight. Belgian authorities, acting on the recommendation of the EU's anti-fraud office, OLAF, have been examining whether the Institute Ferrari ran mishandled or misused hundreds of thousands of euros in public funds between 2014 and 2017. And the charge is that donors were awarded contracts, that financial records were irregular, and that funds meant for pan-European research were possibly channeled into national campaigns, particularly those tied to UKIP and the Brexit movement. Ferrari has denied all wrongdoing, calling the investigation politically motivated and the product of leaks by a hostile Green MEP. But, regardless of whether she is convicted, the optics are dreadful. Farage, who rails against EU corruption and unaccountable elites, now finds that the stench of Brussels bookkeeping has followed him home. His name is not on the charge sheet, but his political capital is bound to the outcome. He met Ferrari while she was working as a waitress in Strasbourg in the mid-2000s. He hired her, mentored her, and eventually fell in love with her, and their personal and political lives became intertwined. And during the same period, UKIP's finances were under scrutiny, as were those of its affiliates, ADDE and IDDE. The former's director, Roger Helmer, resigned amid a separate inquiry into misuse of funds. To be fair, Ferrari's defenders say the IDDE case was dismissed years ago, that EU auditors overreached, and that the European Court of Justice even rebuked the Parliament for bias in the way it handled ADDE's funding dispute. But the Belgium case continues because the judicial referral from Olaf suggested there was sufficient evidence to suspect criminality. It's a technical phrase, but one that carries weight. Olaf does not recommend prosecution lightly. And then there's the matter of the Clacton House, a 4-bedroom property bought in cash for £885,000 now forms the Reform UK leader's political base. Farage insists that the home was bought solely by Ferrari using her own money, yet he initially told interviewers that he had bought it, a slip he later called a misspeak. The BBC's subsequent investigation found little trace of the supposed family wealth that Ferrari claims funded the purchase. Her parents, once small business owners in Strasbourg, are comfortable but not affluent, and the haulage firm her father ran was liquidated in 2020 with more liabilities than assets. Her consultancy, which holds Farage's gin brand, has modest turnover and debts exceeding £10,000. If the money came from Farage and was transferred to Ferrari for the purchase, it would be legal but politically poisonous. It would mean that the man who condemns others for tax avoidance had effectively sidestepped a £44,000 stamp duty by structuring ownership through his partner. His decision to obtain a King's Council opinion on that transaction, while insisting he had no financial interest in the property, only fuels suspicion that something needed clarifying. The political risk for Farage is not legal exposure, but moral hypocrisy. He has been relentless in attacking Angela Rayner over her property arrangements, accusing her of evasion and duplicity. You can't be housing secretary and avoid £40,000 of stamp duty, he said. The amount, coincidentally, is almost identical to the sum he might have saved in Clacton if he had structured the deal to avoid the second home surcharge. What emerges is a picture of political carelessness, or perhaps hubris. Farage thrives on the narrative of the outsider, the pub-going patriot, the man of the people, yet around him swirl the familiar trappings of privilege: consultancy, shell companies, offshore ties, expensive homes, partners under investigation. He spent decades warning that Brussels was a swamp of waste and deceit, and now that swamp seems to be lapping at his own doorstep. Lori Ferrari may well be acquitted. It's possible, even likely, that the Brussels inquiry will be shown to have been politically motivated, but the perception of impropriety is surely corrosive. Reform UK still building itself as a populist insurgency depends on the illusion of moral clarity, us against them. And this episode blurs that line. It reminds voters that even insurgents, once they orbit power and money, are not immune to the gravity of corruption, or at least its appearance. The Farage-Ferrari saga, therefore, is not merely about fraud allegations or property tax. It's about the erosion of political integrity through association and evasion. Whether in Brussels or in Clacton, the same question lingers. Who pays? Who benefits? Who tells the truth? In the end, the whiff of impropriety may not just haunt Nigel Farage's partner. It may haunt the populist purity of his entire political project.